Hello, Sam-ariffic Science fans! I ask you, what is climate, and how is it different from weather? Well, put simply, climate is what the average weather is in any given place. And humans live all over the world, meaning we live in all sorts of climates, meaning we have to adapt, not just technologically, but also our DNA itself changes and adapts to the climates we live in. In this episode of Sam-ariffic Science, we're going to be explaining what climate is, how humans adapt to it, and exactly why different places have different climates to deal with. Sam-ariffic Science fans, today we're going to unfold the world of climate. Okay, so in the introduction, I briefly explained what climate is, but I want to talk about it in greater detail. So, to begin with, I feel like we need to explain what weather is. Weather is what is happening outside, including precipitation and temperature. However, those are short-term things that last only a day or two at most. The climate is very similar, but it's what the average temperature and precipitation is. For example, the climate of a desert is hot and dry, the climate of a rainforest is wet and mild, and the climate of the Arctic is cold and snowy. Since weather is temporary, different places can have all kinds of different weather, and that weather also changes with seasons in places that have those. But in a place with seasons, what is the climate? Is it the average weather from the wintertime, springtime, fall time, or springtime? Well, places like that with seasons actually are just considered to have several different climates. But climate is more than just average weather. It affects us in all kinds of ways, including our DNA. Humans have adapted to the climate of their homes both technologically, which I'll talk about later, and physically, which is what I'm going to talk about first. To do this, I'm going to tell the story of how humans spread across the continents beginning 60,000 years ago, as caveman became the modern humans we know today. About 200,000 years ago, the first humans were born around here, somewhere along the border of what is now called Tasmania, and they were content to stay where they were for over 100,000 years, until a group of humans got adventurous and began to journey across Africa. Then, over 50,000 years ago, humans first left Africa over the Red Sea. At this point, they had stayed in areas with roughly the same climate, but that is about to change. They began to pass through southern Asia, through parts of China, India, and Thailand. Now, these areas' climates definitely do differ from Africa. They have more humid and moist areas, so humans adapted. Next, they made their way to Australia, another continent with a very different climate. These humans had gotten used to humid and slightly warm weather, but they had now entered the continent of Australia, more than 70% covered in dry, hot outback. However, they adapted again, producing more melanin in their skin to build resistance from the sun, and they learned to deal with the extreme heat. Around the same time the first humans reached Australia, another group set out from Africa and traveled north until somewhere around modern-day Turkey. Then they continued to head west until they break up into smaller groups heading all over Asia. Then, 40,000 years ago, several humans made their way to Europe, bringing them into another new climate to which they adapted, and not long after, Neanderthals went extinct. Movement for humans at that point mostly stopped until the ending years of the last ice age, when a group crossed the Bering Strait and entered into the Americas. Like I said, that was right after the last ice age, so humans had already adapted to the cold by learning to produce more body heat when they were cold by involuntarily contracting their skeletal muscles, aka shivering. And when they reached the humid and moist climates of South America, they became tall and thin for maximum heat radiation. So, now you know the way humans adapted to different climates over time, but I still want to talk about some extreme adaptations before moving on to technological adaptations. First up is the Sama people. These people live a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, but not a normal one. They spend up to 8 hours a day hunting underwater and can hold their breaths for up to 10 minutes as easily as you and I can 10 seconds. They also have very low body fat, which makes them negatively buoyant, and a spleen that's up to 5% larger than a normal person's. And since diving too quickly can tear your eardrums, some Bajau people have come up with a clever way to get around that problem without wasting time and air blowing gently through your nose like a normal person. They just say, "Who needs eardrums?" and purposely destroy them at a young age. I wonder how that affects their hearing, though. Then there are the Maasai people, who live in Africa's extreme heat. They have long, skinny limbs that help dissipate heat because they have more surface area. They also have darker skin to avoid sunburn, and they eat raw cows, drink raw cow milk, and drink raw cow blood. Though, I don't know if you can really process cow blood to begin with. Anyway, on to the next section. Humans all over the world have been making things to make their lives more comfortable. There isn't really much fun history to talk about in this section, so I'm just going to go straight to the examples. The first, and arguably most important, is clothing. If you wore shorts and t-shirt to the Arctic, you would get cold, and then freeze and die. So people who live in the chilly north make thick clothing items so that they can trap more heat. They also make sure to cover more skin because if skin is exposed, it gets cold, which puts the person at risk of hypothermia. And thus, the coat was invented. Depending on where you live, owning one of these can literally save your life. However, you could also very easily have the exact opposite problem if you travel somewhere around the equator. Here it's very hot, so if you wear a coat, you'll get hypothermia, which is exactly like hypothermia, just the exact opposite. If you live here, you'll probably wear short, thin, and breathable clothes to keep cool. Our second piece of tech is an air conditioner and heater. If you live somewhere with a hot climate, then you probably have an air conditioner, or AC. These pump cool air through ducts in your house, and it eventually gets pushed out of those ducts and into the main room of your house, cooling you down. And that way, even if your outside is scorching hot, the outside can be a nice cool refuge from the sun. And then the heater does the same thing, but with warm air instead of cool air. So that way, even if the outside is a freezing wasteland, inside is nice and warm. Our final technological adaptation is transport. If you live somewhere that gets snow often enough, like Canada, then having snowplows to clean off your streets is super important for safety. You see, having streets with ice or snow increases the risk of spinning out of control in your car, which is super dangerous. Snowplows also lay salt, which is used for melting the snow and ice. And then on Marjo Island in Brazil, police use water buffalo instead of police cars because they're able to move through the mud, which there's a lot of, much easier than a regular car. The last thing I'm going to talk about in this episode is why different places have different climates. Humidity and amounts of precipitation is largely because of large bodies of water. People near large bodies of water get more rain and snow. And temperature-wise, a lot of it has to do with where you are on the map. Around the equator, it's a lot hotter than the North and South Poles. That's because the equator is in more direct sunlight, and the pole's sunlight is so indirect that for the winter, they don't even get to see the sun for months at a time, and in the summer, they don't get to see the night sky for months at a time. Anyway, that's about all for this video, Sam-ariffic Science fans. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching. But wait, don't go yet. I have one very small favor to ask of you. Please go to my community tab and vote in the poll that looks like this. You'll need to scroll for a bit, but please, scroll. It is for the Book Ramble series, which is where I take a little break from science to talk about my favorite fantasy books. Specifically, this poll is about Wings of Fire, but you don't need to have read the series to vote in the poll, as I explain why and why not to vote for each option. The results of this poll are for an upcoming video, so also comment your reasons, and who knows, I might just read it in the video.